No doubt some would draw comfort from the online summit between US President Biden and China's Xi Jinping. Dialogue's crucial to maintaining peace, don't get me wrong. However, Xi seemed very blunt in warning the US against interference in Taiwan. And our Defence Minister, Peter Dutton, pledged that Australia would definitely support the United States in the event of armed conflict over Taiwan. Given the presence of vital US facilities on our soil, that should be self-evident, yet it seems to have eluded many in our media up to this week. It's inconceivable that China would not take some preliminary action against the joint facilities at Pine Gap and some other crucial ground components of the American space and nuclear capabilities which are on our soil, and I won't go into detail about them, but they would have to be eliminated or blinded ahead of any invasion of Taiwan. Former Foreign Minister Bob Carr alluded to this in a column in the Nine newspapers earlier this week, although neither he nor Paul Keating have conceded that China is already engaged in grey zone warfare against Australia and has been for some time. Right on cue, the Global Times launched another one of its belligerent tirades against Australia, notably Defence Minister Peter Dutton, warning that attacks on our bases would follow any engagement of Australian forces in support of the United States. Now, it's not hyperbole to discern an even more ominous tone to China's rhetoric over Taiwan recently. I sense that they are growing in confidence about their military supremacy inside the first and second island chains, and they have now started to believe that no US president would employ nuclear weapons to defend Taiwan. I warned as much 3 years ago in the Sydney Morning Herald. Now, tonight I'm joined by one of our most operationally experienced generals, Jim Molan, who's been following this issue and is, like me, something of a pessimist and has been on a journey with me looking at various scenarios right back to the US presidential election in November 2020, when we were wondering whether China might actually use the confusion around that disputed election to launch some sort of cross-straits operation. Jim's been a realist and is vigilant in monitoring this issue, and he's sounded warnings about our lack of preparedness, particularly in supply chains and our munitions for any sustained conflict in the island and archipelagic approaches to Australia. And Jim Molan, Senator for New South Wales, joins me here tonight. Well, Jim, welcome back. And firstly, on behalf of all our audience, I know it's just great to see you well and clearly kicking goals physically. You've been battling cancer this year, and it hasn't been a pleasant journey, but you're looking in good nick and back in the building, so welcome back.
It's great to be back. It's great to be back in the building.
Indeed.
And this building throbs, doesn't it, when it's going full steam?
It does.
And I hope it will be a little bit restricted next week. But no, thank you. It's great to be back and I feel good.
Terrific.
We've been living out at our electoral office in Queanbeyan.
Yes.
And that's been good. But this is a mighty building, isn't it? When it works so well.
It does. There's a buzz.
There is a buzz.
Coming in depth of COVID winters and so on, and it's always had it's been a beacon. So
it has.
But look, onto the topic in hand. Right, you and I have been monitoring this now for some years, and look, I don't want to make the situation worse, but I think you and I have agreed over time that Australia's words are not nearly as dangerous as China's actions. Jim, how close to war are we in the Taiwan Straits? I'm seeing an estimate of 6 years from the US official Department of Defence estimate. John Bolton, no mean analyst of foreign affairs, albeit a hawk, suggests that it would happen during the Biden presidency. Others are saying Xi has internal problems that are staying his hand. What's your sense of how avoidable is it? What can we do to avoid it? And what's the worst case scenario?
Well, let's first look at the timeliness of it, when it might occur. If we go back to the Prime Minister's 2020 1st of July strategic update, we could say it could occur tomorrow. Because what he said is that by accident, by mischance, it may occur tomorrow.
Yep.
So we've got to take that as being at face value.
Yep.
Therefore, it could occur tomorrow, and I think that's quite true, because everything I see indicates that the Americans are not confident they can resolve that war to their own satisfaction. That is, they can lose.
Yeah.
That's a nice way of saying they can lose. You mentioned the outside estimates of when it might happen. Admiral Davidson, commander of the Indo-Pacific Command, came out and he said 10 years, might occur within 10 years, but probably within 6 years.
Yeah.
So that's very, very, very important. My view is that if, and it's a big if the American federal budget for defence gets through in the next couple of days, I think it loses, it becomes negated by about the 3rd of December. They've got to get it out by about then. If that gets through and the Americans start building things, and that's dubious, if ours gets through and AUKUS is seen and the Quad comes together, the Chinese might see that the window of opportunity for them to act is closing. And one of the great misunderstandings that Australians have is that they think that a war between China and Taiwan with a possible American intervention is a geographically limited war. It is not.
No way.
And as you were saying in the intro, in my view, the Chinese would be fools to arrange their military in an eye-pleasing manner along their littoral or in the Strait without first taking on the Americans.
Yeah.
And they've got to take on the Americans in Guam, in South Korea, the American bases in Guam, South Korea and in Japan. Maybe also in Diego Garcia and not yet in Darwin, because you haven't got enough in Darwin to make it worthwhile. But there are other targets.
They've got carrier groups on the north side of Hokkaido, which brings Japan in, so it's a regional war automatically.
Absolutely, it's a regional war automatically, and it would have to be preceded by amazing attacks in space and cyber.
Yeah.
So you put all that together, and you could do that in a day. This is what could happen in a day. Space smashed. They practice every day. Cyber, they've been fiddling around with us forever.
Indeed.
Internet. The Americans have got optimised submarines to play with the seabed cables. We can only assume that China has exactly the same thing. So the internet could go down. If suddenly Guam, the Anderson Air Force Base in Guam, is hit by 5 or 6 missiles, which have an accuracy of 5 to 10 metres, then you push that out of the way. If you take all the fuel out of a number of bases like that, and the number of missiles the Chinese would have to use to achieve carrier killing, Guam killing, the Japanese bases and South Korean bases, and then maybe Diego Garcia handled by 1 or 2 submarines down in the Indian Ocean, because that's where the B1s and B2s will be, the big bombers. So they could do it very, very fast. And for us to say we will support the Americans, it might be over before we clear the heads. Yeah. This is the fear I've got.
It's a very real issue.
Yeah. So I think that's where we stand at the moment. I love Peter Dutton's statement because it indicates resolve. Speak softly and carry a big stick. I'm just worried about how big our stick actually is.
And that is the problem, isn't it? In that the lead time on the nuclear submarine is well outside any of the viable scenarios we're hearing. And I guess, tough question to ask someone from the government, but was the minister ahead of the cabinet on this sentiment, or is this a live option within the National Security Committee, as far as you're aware?
Well, I don't know. Honestly, the honest answer is I don't know the answer to that. But I have always found our Prime Minister to be, when he focuses on an issue, to act with resolve. My experience closest to him was when we were doing the borders.
Yes.
And his ability to take an issue and act on it was fabulous. When you and I were in the military, you were writing speeches and we were talking about what the issues were. Then we didn't have the big bogey of China. No. But by crikey, we certainly knew in those days that these silly people who spoke about no threat for 10 years forgot to speak about how long it would take you if the threat came in the 11th year. And so, I've heard people who say what great strategies we had from 1976 in the White Papers onwards, because a lot of bureaucrats and some politicians consider that the production of a paper document which calls itself a strategy is the end product. No, it's not. It is the production of strength and resolve and self-reliance in a nation. And that's what we've got to look at now. And I'm a great supporter of the nuclear submarines as a long-term aim. I'm very interested to know what we'll do if in the next day, in the next 6 months, in the next year, 3 or 6 years, we're going to do. And you know, all the stuff the PM is doing at the moment, and both Minister Price and Minister Dutton are doing great jobs in fixing up the legacy issues that you and I have known existed in the ADF for 100 years. Well, 75 years anyhow. And they must not stop. They must keep doing that. But we've got to take a big look. And I don't know what the intelligence communities are saying, you know, when they're saying this is going to happen. But when it happens, even if we don't join in with the Americans may be forced out of the region.
Yes.
And we'll be sitting there looking up to the north and with China to the north.
It's an alarming prospect. And Jim, I've just noticed right through this discussion, you've used when, not if. So you've crossed the start line. You don't think this is avoidable?
I think the most important thing that Australians should be monitoring is the American defence budget. The only people, you know, we have made ourselves irrelevant in this game. If we had 3 years of really concentrated effort, we could defend ourselves, where every second dollar went to defence and where we knew that this is what we had to do. But I don't see that changing. And this is the problem. When China act, why would they give us notice? Yeah. Why would they accept an increase in tension and fleets come from all over the world? And people say the Brits will come. Well, you know, it's going to take them weeks to get here. And why would the Chinese allow that to happen? And what's one more carrier in the Pacific? Because that just means one more carrier killer missile.
Absolutely, with the hypersonic capability.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think I hope I get a chance to talk to the Minister in the next couple of weeks over how the war might go, because I think unless you understand how the war might go, which is the worst case, hoping for the best case, then we can plan for other cases. But if you plan for how the war might go in the worst case, which I think is the most militarily logical cases, we need to think along those lines.
And I think we're in violent agreement about what the opening salvos might look like in that conflict.